I'm going to walk you through 7 specific signs that a man has been emotionally abused by a narcissistic wife. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly whether what you lived through has a name, because it does. And knowing that name is where your healing begins. Welcome to the Narc Free Man Podcast. Welcome back to the Narc Free Man Podcast. I'm Phillip Dugas. If you are new here, I make content specifically for men who are navigating toxic relationships, whether you are still in it, getting out, or building on the other side of divorce. So make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and let's get into it. Now, before I get into the 7 signs, I need to make sure we are all talking about the same thing, because emotional abuse is one of the most misunderstood forms of abuse that exists. You know, when most people hear the word abuse, picture something physical, right? Like something visible, a bruise, a broken item in your house, something you can point to. Emotional abuse leaves no visible marks. It doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens slowly, quietly over months and years. It is the steady, consistent erosion of a man's confidence, identity, and sense of reality. Now, here's the best way I can explain it. Picture a piece of metal that's strong and solid and reliable, right? Now, picture that same piece of metal sitting outside in the rain every day for 3 years. No single raindrop damages it, but over time, the rust sets in and it weakens and eventually it crumbles, not because of one big storm, but because of the constant daily exposure to something corrosive. Now, emotional abuse in a narcissistic marriage is the rain, and you are the metal. No single argument destroyed you. No single cruel comment broke you, but the daily, relentless exposure to manipulation, criticism, gaslighting, and control over time is what the 3 years of rain did to that metal. And here's the thing about emotional abuse from a narcissistic wife specifically. It is almost always invisible to the outside world. Now, she is charming, warm, and well-liked by everyone around her, but the abuse happens behind closed doors in ways that are subtle enough to make you question whether it's even real. That is all by design. So let's get into the signs. And as I go through each one, I want you to ask yourself one honest question. Does this sound familiar? Sign number 1 is you lost your voice. So the first sign that a man has been emotionally abused by a narcissistic wife is this. He lost his voice. Not literally, he can still talk, but somewhere along the way, slowly, without even noticing it was happening, he stopped saying what he actually thought, what he actually felt, and what he actually needed. Now, let me tell you about David. Not his real name, by the way. But David was the kind of man who always had an opinion. You asked him anything about sports, politics, what restaurants to go to, and he'd tell you exactly what he thought. He was direct, confident, and had no hesitation. But 3 years into his marriage, David's friends started to notice something different. When the group made a decision about where to go, what to do, David would look at his wife first. And before he answered anything, he'd check her expression. He'd wait for a sign of approval before he spoke. He didn't even know he was doing it. That is what emotional abuse does to a man's voice. It doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in hundreds of small moments. Every time you said something and it was turned against you. Every time you shared your opinion and it became the source of a 3-hour argument. Or every time you expressed a need and were made to feel like that need was a burden. Your brain is smart. It is always trying to protect you. And after enough painful experiences of speaking up, your brain learns that speaking up is dangerous. So you stay quiet, to keep the peace, and you're agreeable with her. And you start to censor yourself. You edit yourself before you even open your mouth. You learn to say what keeps the temperature down rather than what is true. And after years of that, you genuinely can't remember what your real opinions are anymore. You have been so focused on managing her reaction that you lost track of your own voice entirely. I call this the disappearing act. Not dramatic, slow, quiet. A man who used to take up space, slowly shrinking himself to fit a room that was never actually designed for him. Here's a question I want you to sit with. When is the last time you said what you actually thought without editing it first? If you had to think about that for a long time, that's a sign. The good news is your voice is not gone. It's just been buried under years of survival mode. And one of the first and most powerful acts of recovery is the decision to start speaking honestly again, even when it's scary, even in small moments, even just to yourself at first. The man you were before this relationship, the one who had opinions and wasn't afraid to say them, he is still in there. He has just been waiting for permission to speak. Okay, sign number 2 is you constantly apologize even when you did nothing wrong. So the second sign is one that most men don't even notice they are doing until someone points it out. You apologize constantly for everything to everyone, even when you did absolutely nothing wrong. You apologize when the food at a restaurant takes too long. You apologize when someone bumps into you on the street. You apologize at work before you even make a request. You apologize for existing in spaces where you have every right to be. I want you to think of it like this. Imagine you got a cut on your hand and you didn't treat it properly, right? So every time you bumped up against it, like a door frame or whatever, it would sting, right? That you have pain every single time. So without even thinking about it, you start protecting that hand. You hold it differently. You move through the world differently. You become hyper aware of anything that might hit it. Now, that hyper awareness is what years of living with a narcissistic wife creates. Except instead of a cut on your hand, the wound is your sense of self. And the bumping is any situation where conflict might arise. Your brain learned that conflict leads to pain because in your marriage, every conflict led to being blamed, shamed, or made to feel like you were the problem. So now your default setting is apologize first, absorb the blame, avoid the conflict, even when there's nothing to apologize for. Now here's how this shows up specifically in men who were married to narcissistic women. Now, in the marriage relationship, when something went wrong, any argument, any tension, any problem, the resolution always required you to apologize. Not because you were always wrong, but because that was the only way the storm would pass. She would escalate through tears, through silence, through explosive anger until you backed down, until you said sorry, until you absorbed responsibility for whatever happened, even if she started it. You learned that your apology was the off switch. And after years of using it, it became automatic. Now, even outside the marriage or relationship, even in situations that have nothing to do with her, that reflex is still firing. You apologize before people can blame you. You absorb fault before it can be assigned. You shrink yourself preemptively to avoid the conflict you have been conditioned to fear. And this is not weakness, this is conditioning. And there is a difference. A dog that has been hit every time it barked doesn't bark anymore. That doesn't mean the dog is broken. It means the dog learned. Your constant apologizing is the same thing. It is the behavior of someone who learned through repeated painful experience that speaking up or standing firm leads to pain. Recognizing this pattern is huge because the moment you see it, the moment you catch yourself apologizing for something you didn't do, you can pause and ask, do I actually owe this an apology, or is this just the reflex talking? Now that pause is power. So the third sign is one of the most disorienting symptoms of emotional abuse. And when I explain it, I want you to really listen, because this one might explain years of confusion. You don't trust your own memory. You remember a conversation happening a certain way, but when you bring it up, she tells you it didn't happen like that, or it didn't happen at all, or you are misremembering, or you are twisting her words, or you are being dramatic. And here's the terrifying part. After enough of those moments, you start to believe her. You start to doubt your own recollection. You wonder if your memory really is that bad. You wonder if really you are that sensitive. You wonder if maybe she's right and you are just not seeing things clearly. Now, let me give you a metaphor that will help you understand exactly what gaslighting does. Imagine you have a compass, and for the first 30 years of your life, that compass worked perfectly. You trusted it completely. It always pointed north. It never let you down. Now, imagine someone starts secretly turning your compass a few degrees in the wrong direction every single day. Not a lot, just a little, by like 1 or 2 degrees. And every time you look at it and say, wait, I don't think this is right, they tell you confidently that you are wrong, that the compass is fine, that you just don't know how to read it. Now, after years of that, you stop trusting the compass. You stop trusting yourself to navigate anything. You become dependent on her to tell you what's real. That is what gaslighting does. It doesn't destroy your perception in one blow. It erodes it slowly, deliberately, until you can no longer tell the difference between what actually happened and what she told you happened. Here's what this looks like in real life. You remember clearly that she agreed to something, plans you made, something she promised. When the time comes, she denies it completely. You remember her saying something cruel to you in an argument. You even remember exactly where you were standing in the kitchen. She tells you she never said that you are making things up, that this is why she can't talk to you. Over time, you stop bringing things up, because every time you do, reality gets rearranged. You start living in a fog, not sure what's real, not sure what you actually experienced versus what you imagined. And the long-term damage of this is one of the most painful things I see in the men I work with. They have been so thoroughly gaslit for so long that they struggle to trust their instincts about everything. Not just her, everything. Their judgment about people, their perception of situations at work, the ability to assess whether something is wrong or whether they're just being too sensitive. The technical name for this is cognitive dissonance, but I'm going to give it a simpler name, reality theft, because that's exactly what it is. She stole your ability to trust reality. Now, here's what I want you to know. If your memory was really as bad as she told you it was, if you were really as crazy as she made you feel, you would not be sitting here right now watching this video, recognizing your own life and what I'm describing. The fact that you recognize it tells me your compass was never broken. It was just being tampered with, and it can be recalibrated. It just takes time away from the person who was turning it. Sign number 4 is your confidence is gone. And this one hits men the hardest when they finally see it. Your confidence is gone. Not your surface confidence. Lots of emotionally abused men are perfectly functional in the outside world. They perform well at work. They seem fine to people who don't know them well, and they can hold a conversation and appear like they have it all together. But deep down in the private spaces of their own mind, the confidence that used to be there has been completely dismantled. Now, here's what I mean. Think about a building, a strong, well-built building that can withstand a lot. Wind, rain, hurricanes, it can stand because its foundation is solid. Now, imagine that every night while no one is watching, someone is quietly chipping away at that foundation. Not the walls, the foundation, the part nobody sees. Now, from the outside, the building still looks fine, right? The foundation is getting weaker though. And one day, not from any single dramatic event, but from the accumulated damage nobody could see, the building starts to crack. That's what a narcissistic wife does to a man's confidence. She doesn't attack the surface, she chips away at the foundation. She does it through constant criticism. Nothing you do is ever quite good enough. The way you handled that situation, not right. The way you spoke to her friend, embarrassing. The way you approach your career, not ambitious enough or too ambitious enough or too ambitious. The way you parent, you're too strict or too soft. The criticism is relentless. And just when you think you have figured out what she wants, the target shifts. She does it through comparison. Other men do this. Other husbands don't act like that. Her friend's husband handled it better. The implication is always the same. You are lacking. You fall short. Other men are getting it right and you are not. And she does it through humiliation, sometimes publicly. A comment in front of friends that lands wrong. A joke at your expense that you are supposed to laugh at. A look she gives other people that signals without words that she is tolerating you rather than choosing you. And she does it through withholding. Her approval, her affection, her warmth, all conditional. You only receive them when you are performing to her standard. And since her standard is always moving, you are always slightly below it. Always earning, never arriving. Now, after years of this, a man stops believing in himself because every piece of evidence his environment gave him said, "You are not enough." I worked with a man recently who had been a successful engineer for about 20 years. He had awards on his wall. He had solved problems that stumped entire teams. And he sat in front of me and said genuinely that, "I don't think I'm that smart. I think I just got lucky." Now, his narcissistic wife had spent 12 years systematically dismantling his belief in his own intelligence. Not with one speech, with 12 years of small, consistent comments that accumulated like water damage in a wall, invisible until the wall starts to collapse. Now, if you recognize yourself in this, if the confident man you used to be feels like a stranger, I need you to understand something. The confidence wasn't destroyed, it was buried. And buried things can be dug up. It takes work. It takes time, but the man who believed in himself before she got to him is still there. He just needs someone to tell him the truth about what actually happened. Sign number 5 is you are hypervigilant, always waiting for something to go wrong. Now, sign number 5 is one that most men don't have a word for, but the moment I describe it, they recognize it immediately. You are hypervigilant. Always on edge, always scanning the room, always waiting for something to go wrong. Even now, even if you are out of the relationship, you might still feel it. The low-level hum of anxiety that never fully goes away. The way you walk into a room and immediately read the temperature. The way you notice subtle shifts in someone's mood before they have said a single word. The way you are always prepared for conflict, even when there is no conflict coming. So let me explain what's happening in your body when you feel this way. When you live in an environment that is consistently unpredictable and threatening, like a toxic relationship with a narcissistic woman, your nervous system adapts. It goes into what scientists call a state of chronic threat detection. Your brain literally rewires itself to be constantly watching for danger because in your environment, danger was always possible at any moment. Think of it like living next to a volcano. If you live next to a volcano that erupts randomly, sometimes it's quiet for weeks, sometimes exploding with no warning, you would never fully relax, obviously, right? So even on the quiet days, some part of you would always be listening, always watching, always ready to run, because experience has taught you that peace doesn't come safe. It just means not yet. Now, that is what living with a narcissistic wife does to a man's nervous system. Her explosions, her mood swings, her rage, her silent treatment were unpredictable. There was no reliable pattern you could follow to avoid them, so you stopped trying to predict and started trying to detect. Your body became a threat detection machine, running constantly, draining you of energy and peace, even on the calm days. This is why so many men who divorce these narcissistic women describe feeling exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. It's the exhaustion of a nervous system that has been running on high alert for years. And here's what hypervigilance looks like in daily life for men who are married to narcissistic women. You can read a room within seconds of walking in. You notice micro expressions, a slight tightening around the eyes, a change in body language or posture before most people even register that someone's mood has shifted. You are always 5 moves ahead in a conversation, anticipating where it could go wrong. And you struggle to fully relax, even in completely safe environments, because your body doesn't fully believe it's safe. And you might also notice it in smaller ways. You flinch at sudden sounds. You feel a spike of anxiety when your phone rings from an unknown number. You overreact to minor conflicts because your nervous system can't calibrate between a small problem and a big threat. It treats everything like a potential emergency. Now, none of this means you are broken. All of it means your body did exactly what it was designed to do. It adapted to survive a threatening environment. The problem is that the adaptation doesn't automatically switch off when the threat is removed. And healing from hypervigilance takes time, consistency, and safety. Now, sign number 6 is you isolated yourself. And this one is painful to look at. It is one of the clearest signs that emotional abuse was happening. You pulled away from the people who loved you, your friends, your family, the people who knew the real you before this relationship. You drifted from them. The friendships thinned out. The calls got less frequent. The invitations stopped coming, or you stopped accepting them. And if you are honest with yourself, you can trace exactly when it started happening. Let me tell you a story. 2 guys, college roommates, best friends for 15 years. Every week they'd catch up. Every year there was a boys' trip. It was just what they did. Nobody had to schedule it. It just happened. Then one of them got married. At first, things were mostly the same, but slowly, small things started to change. The weekly call got shorter. The annual boys' trip got complicated, and there were conflicts, reasons that it didn't work out. And when they did spend time together, the married one seemed distracted, quieter, less like himself. After a few years, they barely talked. The friendship didn't end with a fight. It just kind of faded. What his friend didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. Every time they made plans, she had a problem with it. She didn't like his friend because he was a bad influence, or the trips were selfish. And the friendship was always positioned as something competing with the marriage rather than something that existed alongside it. So slowly, to avoid the conflict, he started declining. started canceling, started making his world smaller to fit the shape of what she wanted. Not because he wanted to lose his friend, but because maintaining that friendship came with a price that kept getting higher. Now, this is one of the most consistent patterns of narcissistic abuse, the slow, deliberate narrowing of a man's social world. And it is rarely done with a direct, you can't see your friends. It is done through friction, through sighing when he makes plans, through being cold and distant when he gets home from an outing with his friends, through subtle comments about his friends that plant seeds of doubt. Like, do you think they actually respect you? Or I just don't think they are good people you should be hanging around. Now, over time, the friction becomes easier to avoid, then the friendship becomes worth maintaining. And the man ends up isolated, not by force, but by 1,000 small discouragements that added up to the same result. Isolation is one of the key tactics of emotional abuse in a toxic relationship, whether it is intentional or not, because an isolated man has no outside perspective, no one to reflect back to him what they are seeing, no one to say, hey, what you were describing doesn't sound right. He is entirely dependent on her interpretation of reality because she has become his only world. Now, if you look back at your marriage and realize that you ended up with a much smaller life than you started with, fewer friends, less family contact, fewer things that were just yours, that contraction was not an accident. It was the architecture of the abuse. The good news is that real friendships are remarkably resilient. The men I have worked with who reached back out to old friends even after years of distance found that more often than not, those friends were waiting. Rebuilding those connections is one of the most healing things a man can do in recovery. Not because you need to explain everything that happened, but because being around positive people who knew and valued the real you before the relationship is a powerful reminder that the real you still exists. Sign number 7 is you don't recognize yourself anymore. So the 7th and final sign, and in many ways it is the one that everything else has been building toward, you don't recognize yourself anymore. You look in the mirror and you see someone who looks like you, but something is off. The man you see doesn't quite match the man you remember being, or the man you always thought you'd become. He is quieter, less certain, more careful. He moves through the world with a kind of tentativeness that wasn't there before. He second guesses things that used to be automatic. He has strong opinions somewhere deep inside, but doesn't let them out. He is functional, sometimes even impressive, but there is something missing, a spark, a groundedness, a sense of being fully himself. Now, let me give you one final metaphor here, and I want you to sit with this one. I want you to picture a tree, a strong, deep-rooted tree that has grown for decades. It has weathered storms. It has adapted to its environment. It stands tall. Now, transplant that tree, take it out of the ground it grew in, put it in a pot, and control every element of its environment. Control how much water it gets. Control whether it gets sunlight. Control the temperature. And whenever it tries to grow in a direction you don't like, prune it back. Now, after years of that, the tree still looks like a tree, but it has been shaped, constrained, into a form that served the person controlling it, not the form it would have taken if it had been left to grow naturally. That is what emotional abuse does to a man's identity. You were a tree with deep roots and natural direction, and over the years, she pruned you, controlled your environment, shaped you into a form that worked for her, that kept her comfortable, that fed her need for control and eliminated the parts that challenged or threatened her. And now standing in the open air of your own life. Maybe for the first time in years, you don't quite know which direction to grow. So here's what I want you to understand about this sign. Not recognizing yourself is not a permanent state. It is a symptom. It is the natural result of years of having your identity managed by someone else. And the fact that you notice the disconnect, the fact that you look in the mirror and know something is off, means you have not lost yourself completely. You still have a reference point. You still remember somewhere that there was a different version of you. That reference point is everything. And recovery from narcissistic emotional abuse is essentially the process of finding that version of yourself again, remembering his opinions, honoring his needs, giving him permission to take up space. It is slow. It is not linear. Some days you will feel like yourself, and some days you will feel completely lost. Every single day that you choose to be honest about what you think, what you feel, what you need, you are putting down a new root. Slowly, quietly, you are becoming yourself again. And that man, the one who existed before this relationship, was worth knowing. He deserves to come back, not to who he was before, exactly, but stronger, clearer, more grounded than he has ever been, because he has been through something that would have broken most people, and he is still standing. Let me put this all together. 7 signs a man has been emotionally abused by a narcissistic wife. 1 is he lost his voice. He stopped saying what he actually thought because experience taught him it wasn't safe. 2, he apologizes constantly, even when he did nothing wrong. That's not weakness, that's conditioning from years of being blamed for everything. 3, he doesn't trust his own memory. Gaslighting stole his ability to trust his own perception of reality. 4, his confidence is gone, not from one moment, from years of quiet, systematic chipping away at his foundation. 5, he is hypervigilant. His nervous system is still on high alert, still waiting for the next explosion that isn't coming. 6, he isolated himself. His world got smaller because maintaining it came with a price that kept getting higher. 7, he doesn't recognize himself anymore. His identity was slowly pruned and shaped to fit someone else's needs. Now, I want to say something directly to you. If you recognize yourself in any of those 7 signs, if you sat here nodding your head or felt something tighten in your chest because you have never heard it described so clearly before, I want you to hear this. What happened to you was real. It had a name, and it was not your fault. You were not too sensitive. You were not too needy. You were not difficult or broken or hard to love. You were a good man in a situation specifically designed to make good men doubt themselves. And the fact that you are here watching or listening to this podcast episode, looking for clarity, refusing to stay stuck, that says everything about who you are. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are exactly where healing starts. Now, here are 3 things I want to encourage you to do right now. First, if this episode helped you understand something you have been carrying for a long time, share it. There is a man in your life who is in the middle of this and has no name for it. Send him this video. It might be the thing that changes his direction. Second, drop a comment below. Tell me which of the 7 signs hit closest to home for you. I read every comment. Third, if you are ready to go deeper, I have 2 options for you right now. First, if you need one direct private conversation, someone to look at your specific situation and tell you honestly what you are dealing with and what to do next, book a clarity call with me. It's a 45-minute private session, and it has changed the direction of more lives than I can count. I'll link that down in the description below. And if you are ready to learn how to break free from a toxic relationship with a narcissistic wife, check out my book, The Narcissistic Wife. You can find it on Amazon or on Audible, and I'll link it in the description below as well. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.